What is up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Fight Forecast. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. So, um, it's just going to be me tonight. And also, compared to the podcast that you saw before, where I was giving out my bets, my DraftKings lineup, stuff like that. I recently have signed on to DFI.com to be one of their MMA content providers. Due to that, I can no longer give out certain information on the podcast. So it's going to be done a little bit differently now, where we're breaking down the fights and stuff like that and giving you a little bit of insight. But when it comes to the actual plays and stuff like that, you would have to subscribe to DFI.com in order to get the actual plays when it comes to that nature. With that being said, though, it's still a great fight card, and let's break down these fights and hopefully make some money for you guys. So the first fight we got of the night, we got Sergey Spivak versus Carlos Filipe. Honestly, when I was doing tape of this fight, I couldn't find much tape on Felipe. What I saw of either fighter didn't really do too much for me personally. Uh, but in talking to a couple other people and watching some tape on Spivak, I do think that he does have a good chance this fight. Um, he's shown some pretty good power, some pretty good sub skills. So I wouldn't be surprised if he could get a finish in this fight. Um, Even if he doesn't, I think that there is a very good chance that he does win via decision. He's just, fought more better named fighters than Felipe has. So I think that. Um, yeah, I think there is a very good chance that he does win this fight. If not via finish, then absolutely via decision. I think that this is a pretty one-sided fight, honestly. Um, so the next fight we got here, we got David Ramos versus Aman Taraskin. Um, Honestly, this fight doesn't do much for me at all. I do know that a lot of people are on Armin. I personally just don't really see it. Um, Looking at the tape of these two fighters, neither of them really does much for me. If I did have to do a slight lean, it absolutely would be Arman. He does, but it's a very slight lean. Um, and honestly, I'm not even 100% sure of that. Ramos does average 2.42 takedowns per fight, and Arman does only have a 66% takedown defense. Not the worst in the world, but absolutely not the best either. Uh, Neither of these fighters, I think, are very good strikers or any good at really anything. So, it very well could be a decision victory, which, if Ramos can get those takedowns, I think that he could take it. Um, this is going to be one of those fights that I honestly don't touch much at all. I just don't really see the upside in either of these fighters when it comes to betting, DraftKings, anything like that. I just don't really see the upside in this fight at all, personally. Um, so the next fight we got here, we got Malcolm Gordon versus Amir Albazi. Um, a lot of books to start off the week did not have this fight on the card. It has started being added to more books as the week goes on, but even as of early as this morning, it wasn't on my bookie and stuff like that. Um, I do like Gordon in this fight. I think that he is the type of fighter that has the striking skills that he could get a finish, or if not, get at least enough significant strikes to be able to get a pretty decisive um, decision victory. Amir, he seems to get himself in trouble a lot. He backs himself up against the fence. Um, doesn't really have the best defense. It kind of reminds me a lot of Woodley, how he kind of plays around on the fence, mostly at least his last couple fights, which has gotten Woodley in trouble a lot in his couple fights recently. I think we very well could see something like that again, where him being up against the fence gets him in trouble and he gets rocked. Gordon does have very good striking skills, so I would not be at all surprised if he could get the finish. But like I said, even if he can't get the finish, I do think that there's a very strong likelihood that he does win this fight. He is an underdog, so you're getting good underdog value there. Um, so I would consider throwing something on that fight possibly, because you're getting good value at honestly, from the tape that I've watched, I think this should be a pick'em fight at worst. And honestly, I think Gordon could maybe even be favored by the time that the fights roll around. The next fight we got here is one that I'm pretty interested in when it comes from a DraftKings perspective more so than a betting perspective. Though I do have a play on one of these two fighters. It's Mont Montel Jackson versus Brett Johns. Both of these guys are absolute takedown artists. That is what they excel at. Is getting the takedown, getting the fight to the ground. Both of them average over 4 takedowns per fight. So I do think that this is a fight that could be sneaky when it comes to DraftKings, especially um, for the underdog. Um, I personally do think that Johns does have the better chance of winning here. He's just fought better competition when it comes to his UFC career. Both of the fighters are very much equal when it comes to skills. I think Jackson has a little bit better skills on the feet. Johns has a little bit better skills on the ground. But when it comes down to it, I just think that Johns has fought better competition, and his only losses in the UFC have been against very good competition. So I think that he has what it takes to be able to get a decision victory. I don't see this fight finishing. Neither of these guys are really finishers. So I do think that it more than likely will go to a decision. Um, Either way, you're set to get a whole bunch of takedowns, whichever fighter you go with. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of these fighters get 3 to 5 takedowns in a 3 round fight. So it's definitely going to be a very interesting fight to watch. I think it very well could be like a Bryce Mitchell, uh, Rosa type fight where it's on the ground and we're seeing a lot of transitions, a lot of reverses, all of that. So a very exciting fight, but in a different way. Um, so I am definitely interested in this fight. I know I have a bet on it already, um, and I'm sure to have probably some of these fighters in my lineups as well, just due to the fact that with those 5 points per takedown that you get, those can add up very quick when you add in some strikes and even just a decision based victory. Um, so the next fight that we got here, We got Joe Duffy versus Joel Alvarez. On paper, this fight I think is a lot closer than the line shows. Duffy is a very big favorite in this fight. He's one of the highest favorites on the card. But I do think that it is a closer fight than those lines show. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think that Duffy is the better fighter. He is that big of a favorite for a reason. But if you look at the stats of these two fighters and the strikes that they throw per fight, the strikes that they absorb per fight, takedowns, takedown defense, all that, both of them are very well equal when it comes to those stats. At the end of the day, I think that Duffy just has the advantage due to the fact of his level of competition in the UFC. Just like John's, he's lost against some of the best. So I think that will help him against Alvarez. I think Alvarez could be a sneaky play on DraftKings. He won't be very high owned, but not a bad sneaky play if you're looking for something. Not 100% sure if I'll go that route, but definitely not a bad idea to throw him in a few lineups if you are playing multi lineups. I do think Duffy will be very high owned this week. He is one of the higher priced salary fighters on this slate, and on this type of slate where we don't have really any standout stud fighters at higher price, in my opinion. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Duffy is one of the top two highest priced fighters of this slate. So, picking someone like Alvarez could very well differentiate you from the field in those high GPP games. So the next fight we got here is another one of those fights where you're getting that one of the highest, actually, I believe the highest priced fighter on this slate. So we got Grant Dawson versus Naramini. Dawson is an absolute stud when it comes to getting takedowns. He averages 5.09 takedown to fight. And, I mean, I just don't see how he isn't one of the top plays this slate, honestly. I know some people are a little bit worried that this could be a fight that he falters at a little bit. I personally just don't see it at all. I think that he will be able to land enough signature strikes, get enough takedowns. Like I said, the guy averages 5 takedowns a fight. So even if you just get those 5 takedowns, 30, 40 significant strikes, and a decision-based victory, we're still talking about 70, 80 points there, and that's on the low end. He is the highest priced fighter, so I do expect him to be very high owned. For his price, I think that he honestly may need to get a finish, which I don't think is impossible to do against Namid. I think he very well could get a finish this fight, but it being, I believe, 9,300, unless he's getting 90 to 100 points, he's not really worth that salary. I definitely will have some of him, but I think it's more so due to the fact just that a lot of the other options this slate really don't entice me that much compared to previous weeks where a lot of the higher priced people were the ones that enticed me. This card I think does have a lot of live dogs. So I think that this very well could be a slate where you see one of those lineups with five, six, 700, $1,000 left on the table that wins the GPP. So I don't necessarily think that you have to go these high-priced fighters in order to have a chance of taking down a GPP this slate. I think this is one of those ones where you can differentiate a little bit, and kind of go with what you think works best for you, compared to having to have one of those higher priced fighters in your lineup. So the next fight we got Roman Dolivzev versus Kitis Abrigmov. I personally think that this is a very bad matchup for Kitis. He is on a 2-fight losing streak. He eats 6 strikes per minute, and he's going against a guy who has won by KO in 3 straight fights. This just seems like an absolute recipe for disaster to me. I personally, I just don't see how he wins this fight. He does not have good chin at all. So I personally don't see how Roman loses this fight. Honestly, Roman, I think, will probably be one of my my higher owned fighters this slate, more than likely. And I think this is honestly a pretty easy one to pick personally. I just don't think Addis has the chin in order to be able to stand with Roman. So the next fight we got here is one that I personally I differentiate from a lot of people from what I've seen here. We got Alexandre Pinchot versus Askarov. When it comes to DFS, I think this will be a pretty boring fight, honestly. I don't think that either of these fighters will put up too much. Wouldn't be surprised at all if the winner of this fight scores 60 or 70 points. If I had to, gun to the head, pick one of the two, I would pick Askarov. I think that he is just a little bit better of a fighter when it comes to defense and stuff like that. Both of them, when it comes to stats, are pretty even. But I think Askarov has a little bit better defense, eats a little less strikes per fight, that in what should be a pretty close fight, in my opinion, that it could come down to that. And I mean, like I said, it's a very slight lean for me. I really don't like either of these fighters at all. But I think Askarov probably would be the play, especially in GPP, because I don't think that he will be very high owned. But at the same time, even in a multi-entry GPP, I'd probably only throw a couple of them in there, just due to the fact that, like I said, I would not be surprised at all if the winner of this fight scores 70 points, and that's not going to be something that's going to take down a GPP for you. So this is about as close to a full fade fight as I can get this card personally. The next fight we got here is one of my favorite fights of the night. Honestly, I think it is a very, very sneaky play when it comes to DFS. We got Ariana Lipski versus Luana Carolina. Personally, I think this fight is going to be an absolute brawl. Both of these girls just love to throw down, love to throw strikes. So both fighters, eat 4 strikes per minute. Both of them throw over 4 strikes per minute. Hell, one of them throws and lands 6 strikes per minute. We did see Carolina in her last DFS fight score over 100 points on DraftKings, mostly due to significant strikes. I would not at all be surprised if we see that again, where the winner of this fight does get over 100 due to the significant strikes that they land. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if both of these fighters score 70 plus points. I think that this is going to be a fight that is going to rack up the significant strikes, and that it honestly could be a contender for fight of the night. That it's going to be just an absolute brawl, which we don't see very often with female fights, but I think that we will see that here. For GPP, I never really do suggest stacking, just because of the fact that it's very high risk unless we're getting both fighters throwing over, getting over 100 points, which is highly unlikely in a 3-round fight. I personally would not stack this fight. However, cash, I think we have enough value on this slate that we don't have to stack, honestly. This would be the type of fight that I think I would stack if I was going to stack one, but I think we have enough value on this slate that we don't have to do that. And, either one of them that you go with, I think could be very viable in cash as well as GPP. So this is definitely a fight that I think I will be targeting a fair amount. So the next fight we got here is another one that I think, from some of the people that I've talked to, that I have different opinion on. We got Mark Dikizi versus Rafael Fazez. This is a huge step up for Rafael. And I think it's a little too much, a little too soon. Don't get me wrong, he has shown great promise, but Dikizi, if you look at the fighters that he has lost against, it's very, very good fighters. He doesn't lose against fighters that are not well known. Fazez eats 3.96 strikes per minute, and Dikizi only lands 2.86 per minute. I would not at all be shocked to see him finish him. Even without that, I honestly think that Dikizi will be able to just kind of pick him apart this fight and do what he needs to do to get a pretty decisive win. Like I said, I think Rafael is a very good up and coming fighter. It's just that this was way too soon for him. Honestly, I think he should have had a couple more smaller fights to ease his way into a fighter of Dikizi's level. So I personally don't see how Dikisi loses this fight. The next fight we got here is one that I was actually very surprised when I've seen the line, and it's gone down actually from what I initially betted it, which surprises me. We got Calvin Gaslim versus Jack Hermasian. Now, don't get me wrong, Calvin is not the greatest DraftKings fighter. I would not at all be surprised if he only gets 60 or 70 points on DraftKings, even in a decision-based victory. But I just don't think that Calvin would lose this fight. He has lost his last 2 fights, yes, but if you look at the talent that he's lost against, it's the same thing as Dikisi. It is against the best of the best in his divisions. Don't get me wrong, Hermason is a great fighter, but I just don't think he's at the level of the fighters that Gaslim has lost against. And I don't think that Gaslim is honestly going to have an issue here. I think he'll be able to kind of impose his will, get the takedown if he wants to get the takedown, throw some strikes. I honestly, it wouldn't shock me if he does finish the fight late in like the third or something like that. But I'm more so thinking probably a decision-based victory. But I personally, this line, I'm not sure about it at all. It doesn't really make sense to me why Calvin's line is going down. I think when I initially looked at it, he was like negative 140, 150, something like that. And even that I thought was kind of low for this fight. And I've seen it as low as negative 110 now. So basically a pick 'em. Maybe I'm missing something here, and if that's the case, then so be it. But I just don't see how Calvin loses this fight, honestly. So I guess we'll see. But that's kind of my take on this fight. That I think every card, I think Vegas fucks up one line, where they make a mistake. Personally, I think that this is that one line, this card, that they made a mistake on. This is the fight that I think we can capitalize on and make some good money on. And the last fight of the card, the main event of the evening, we have a rematch. A rematch from about 5 months ago. We got Joseph Benavidez versus Dawson Figueroa. And so initially, like I said, these guys fought about 5 months ago. Dawson won in the second round via knockout. Now, there was some controversy in that fight. Benavidez did get headbutted in the second round, causing a cut, which ended up having him get rocked, ended up having him losing via knockout. Before that, some people say it was a close fight. Some people say Dawson was, kind of controlling the fight. Personally, I think he was controlling the fight. I think that even had that headbutt not happened, that he very well was going to win that fight. I just, don't get me wrong, Benavidez is a good fighter. I just don't think he's on the level of Dawson. I think Dawson is a different kind of beast when it comes to this division. I think everything Benavidez is good at, Dawson is just a little bit better at. So I we see many times in rematch fights that most times they more than likely go the same, especially if they're rematches that happen this closely after the initial fight. We're talking just 5 months ago that these guys fought. We're not talking a couple years apart here where Benavidez would have had time to, improve. So personally, I don't see how this fight goes any differently than the first fight did. Um, I don't necessarily know if Benavidez does get finished this fight, but I do think that Davazian absolutely wins it. At very worst, I think that he wins a pretty decisive uh, decision victory. But I would not at all be shocked if Benavidez does get knocked out, as his chin has looked a little bit questionable recently. So, I mean, you never know. Anything can happen. But that's my personal take on this. I think that this is a fight, being a 5-round fight. Both guys do like to throw a fair amount. I think that this is a fight that you could consider stacking in cash. Once again, never stack in GPP, at least not this type of fight. Um, but in cash, it's a viable option. There is a lot of value that I like on this card tonight. So, you can go one way or the other on stacking or not stacking this card. But it is an option. So yeah, man, that is the breakdown for these fights. Like I said, initially it was going to be a little bit different due to the fact that it was just me tonight. I hope to next week have AJ back on or someone else co-hosting with me to kind of bounce things off of. But yeah, man, let's get this money, and absolutely feel free to hit me up on Twitter at our SCMMA89 if you have any questions, or absolutely follow me and my buddy Dave on DFI. We're the ones putting out the MMA content there. So if you're looking for a good subscription to get some good information about the fights, our must plays, our breakdowns of all the fights, our bets, um, core, all that stuff, make sure that you do take a look at dfi.com. Go ahead, subscribe, even if it's just to try it out, and let's win this money, guys.